Welcome to the CDRB Show, the podcast where you get to know some of the coolest people around. I'm your host, Christian Rodriguez, and each week I sit down with a special guest to chat about their life, career, and all the things that make them awesome. We cover some serious topics that matter, but don't worry, we keep it real and laid back. You never know what kind of insights and surprises you'll get, but one thing's for sure, we're always having a good time. So kick back, relax, and join us for another episode of the CDRB Show. Hello everyone and welcome to the CDRB Show, where we invite special guests every week, and today I have the pleasure of having here Dr. William Clary. How are you?
Oh, very well. Thank you, Christian, and many thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting. I know that we'll have a great talk today. And first, I want to have some background about you because my main purpose here in this program is to get to know more the people that comes here. The last time we had President Dunsworth, and I know that he said a lot of things that most of the people probably didn't know. So I want to know about you first. Where were you born?
I was born in El Paso, Texas in 1954.
I can see now probably some of the background of why you have a close relationship with Latinos maybe. And I mean, you're very Latino in my opinion, and you have a great Spanish. And so it makes me wonder, how was life like when you were a child? And how was like when you were growing up in El Paso, Texas?
Well, actually, I didn't grow up in El Paso. I was born there, but my family only lived there a short amount of time.
Okay.
My parents moved subsequently to Connecticut for a couple of years, and then we ended up living in Springfield, Missouri, not too far from here. Mm-hmm. And that's where I grew up. Those were my formative years, Springfield, Missouri. So really not much contact there with Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
Springfield, in the years that I was a young boy growing up and a teenager, was very homogeneous, very not very much ethnicity, very conservative town. Mm-hmm. It reminds you, maybe if you have a stereotype about the 50s, about what life was like in the United States in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Really, everything was rigidly circumscribed in terms of behavior and expectations. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the environment that I grew up in until I went away to college.
How were you raised by your parents? What were the values that your parents gave you when you were growing up?
That's a very interesting question. Up until about 1966, when I was 12 years old, I was brought up in a fairly conservative household, very traditional in a lot of ways. But the changes that were really transformative that began to be felt in the mid-60s influenced my family maybe more than others. And so the rules changed. Mm-hmm. They became less strict. There was more freedom for me and my brothers and sister to move around and do things. Yeah. We weren't. There wasn't as much control. I think on the outside in society at large in Springfield in those years, though, it was still rigidly conservative all the way up till when I graduated in 1972 from Glendale High School. Yes.
Could you say if you had any struggle when you were like in your childhood? Last time I was telling this that in Honduras it's not uncommon to have struggle in your childhood, mostly in the generation of my parents, for example, because my dad, for example, he had to work since he was in 5th grade to get food for the whole family. So I was wondering, did you had any of that struggles, maybe not similar, but any struggle that you had during your childhood?
Well, economically, no. My father was a doctor, and he made a good salary, so economically we were fine. I think the the problems or the conflicts, if we can call them conflicts, at that time were more cultural.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. society was transforming in the late '60s, and that created some friction between me and some of the people that I went to school with. It wasn't anything major, but these were some things that were happening culturally about that time, 1968 to 72.
What type of cultural?
Well, there was a group of us that started to grow our hair long, and we started to protest the Vietnam War,
Okay.
and we had different kinds of ideas about what the United States political system should be.
Mm-hmm.
And that came into conflict with some of the more conservative people that I was, around in school. I remember being suspended from school in 1970 when the bombing of Cambodia took place, and there were walkouts all over the United States at the university level. But at our high school level, 5 or 6 of us walked out of school, and we were, of course, suspended for that inappropriate behavior.
Inappropriate for them, right?
For them, exactly. That's exactly right.
So using the long hair was a way of protest?
It was very symbolic, yeah. It was a way of expressing sort of an iconoclastic image, against the values that had brought us to this really a kind of a really polarized point in the United States at that time. You've probably heard of Kent State when students were killed protesting the war. There was a lot of polarization, and long hair was kind of a way to express that without saying anything. It was a sign of solidarity, and of course it clashed with people that were more conservative at that time, and there were people in high school that my hair was probably, I don't know, among the 10 or 15 guys that had long hair. Mine was I was in that group, and people would threaten to cut my hair and things like that, and threaten to.
Oh, really?
It was strange.
Did you have any issue outside of school, or was only mainly at school that you had those?
Mainly
issues?
at school. That's where that's where the socialization process was more intense, and you ran into people from all over different walks of life. Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your family right now? How is your family? Do you have children?
Yeah, well, my parents are deceased. They both passed away in the last 15 years. My sister lives in Concord, Massachusetts. She's works for a big pharmaceutical company. She's been working for those for years. I have a brother in St. Louis that is a math teacher, and I have a brother in Springfield, Missouri, who's a restaurateur, and they're all doing well. My family is fine. I'm married to a woman, Maritzu Seda, from Nicaragua, and we have one son whose name is Kenneth, and he's doing quite well now. He's working in Florida, in Boca Raton, and he's doing really well.
He's working in what?
He's working as a freight dispatcher for Gold Coast Trucking.
Okay.
And he's actually doing a great job. He's like leading the office.
Oh,
and
that's great.
I'm really proud of him. He's made a lot of progress in the last 3 or 4 years, and he's on track, and he's likes his job a lot, and he's doing well, and he's becoming almost independent economically, which is a good thing.
Now let's talk about your educational background a little bit. First, I want to ask you this question. Were you a good student when you were at college?
The first year was a year of adjustment, and I didn't understand the expectations at the University of Missouri, which is where I went to school in Columbia, Missouri. And so I had a little bit of I didn't have bad grades. I think I had a 2.4 or something, but I didn't understand that to really succeed at the university level, you had to apply yourself. You had to bear down. You had to do the work. And back then in the 70s, this is early 70s, there were no supports. There wasn't any support system for students. I guess I could have contracted or hired a tutor, but we didn't live like that. And we wanted to do it on our own. And some of the classes were quite challenging. You had to sit down and study a lot to do well. And by the time I was a junior, my grades were pretty good. I was doing okay.
What will you say it was the hardest class for you during college?
I thought, I'm not much on science. I thought geology was difficult. I thought psychology was difficult for me. I was a history major, and I loved history. I majored in history, and so that was what I really liked. I guess I did okay in math, but I think geology was probably the hardest class I took. One of the ones that I really liked that I didn't think I was going to was ornithology, the study of birds, and that was a beautiful experience. Yeah.
Did you fail any class?
No.
No?
I didn't fail any classes.
And how did you find that you wanted to study history as your major?
Well, my mother was a historian. She'd gotten her master's at in SMS in Springfield, and she was had grown up in the Canal Zone in Panama. So she got her master's there, and then she was doing a PhD at Washington University that she didn't finish, but she was doing it in Latin America. She's working on Mexican history. So I guess I maybe inherited that love of history, but I think it really developed in classes that I took. I had some great professors. There was a professor I had named William Wysick, who was a constitutional historian. Amazing professor, and I loved that class. And it just, there's a love for learning that you develop as you succeed at it, and that's kind of why. And I guess history, because of my mother, I was just always captivated by history. Yes.
What are your postgraduate studies?
Well, I didn't have a traditional trajectory. I didn't, upon graduation, I didn't just jump to grad school like, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I had a 10-year hiatus that I dedicated my time to working and traveling. And after I had done that for about 12 years, and I'd probably done 15 to 20 trips to Latin America on my own, I decided to go back to graduate school in Spanish in 1985.
So after those trips to Latin America, maybe you got the motivations to study doctors.
Yes, I think absolutely. The origin of my love for Latin American culture and Spanish is rooted in the experiences that I had when I traveled. And these were not trips that that I went on that somebody else put together. These are trips that I put together myself, and I realized on my own. And I sort of was an autodidact in the sense that I became committed to learning Spanish because I was falling in love with the culture. And so the entry point into Latin American culture is the Spanish language. If you don't have that, you can't really work within it. So my dad was a linguist. He studied languages as a hobby his whole life, Chinese and Arabic and so forth. And so I guess, I was kind of, it came easy to me, and I liked Spanish and Spanish linguistics and, of course, the culture also. But yeah, the trips were the linkage, absolutely.
So you learned Spanish by yourself? You never took courses?
No, I never took class. I had a couple of classes in junior high that we really didn't really learn Spanish. There was it was real basic stuff. No, I basically learned it on my own, but it was sink or swim. If you're traveling through rural Latin America on your own, you kind of have to learn Spanish to get along, because back in those days, nobody spoke English.
Yeah, it was
no,
pretty difficult.
Very, very few.
Maybe just the high.
Yeah, and I wasn't hanging out with them.
Yeah. So how long did it took you to master your Spanish? Because
I'm still working on it.
I hear you always speaking Spanish, and for me, I don't have I don't get the difference between a person from Latin America and you.
Well, that's a compliment I'm not sure that I really deserve, but it took me, before I went back to grad school, I'd been studying Spanish 7 or 8 years. And of course, in grad school, you study the language much more systematically and formally by studying texts, analyzing texts, and that requires that your vocabulary improve and expand quite a bit. So, I guess it really came together when I was in graduate school. And I always feel that any language is so big, you never really fully learn it. It's always an ongoing process.
It's always evolving, right?
Yes, exactly.
So how will you say you started to feel with Spanish during like your first year speaking Spanish? How confident did you feel, or how was compared to what I have listened now? Because right now you're very fluent.
Well, I tried to I was kind of extroverted, and so I tried to go out and speak to people, and didn't want to get into too in-depth conversations at the start. It was more about talking about basic things, but I listened very carefully. I tried to work on the accent, tried to help, tried to imitate accents was one of the things I like to do a lot. So it's a process, The first few years, I'm sure I didn't speak very well. I don't remember how I spoke. I knew that I was able to communicate fine, but it's.
And nowadays, you still like to imitate accents.
Oh,
right?
it's one of my hobbies. Yeah, I love to imitate accents. Yes.
Talking about hobbies, what do you usually do on your spare time, like out of the university?
You'll probably think this is, too stereotypical, but what I do is read. I read and dedicate my time to movies, texts. I do, sometimes I watch a basketball game or baseball game, but it's not a big thing of mine. I have gotten into something over the last 25 years, which is working in the courts also. I do that some. That presents a linguistic challenge that is never ending, and that's another way to improve your Spanish, because it's judicial Spanish is very complex, and it's very precise, and we're supposed to be machines. We're not supposed to make any errors, so you want to try perfection. I still like to travel quite a bit. I like to exercise. That's another thing. Yeah. I do some cooking, I used to play the guitar a lot, and I'm really kind of a mind where I need to go back and get me an acoustic guitar to have that.
What do you do on a regular weekend, for example? On a normal weekend?
Watch a couple of movies, read some novels. Sometimes I work on a paper that I'm working on. One of the things that I've done more recently is recommunicated with old friends that I had in the 70s and 80s, and talked to them on the phone some, and do a little bit of reliving of the old days, and reminding ourselves that we're getting old and that we have to stay in contact with each other, because it's good for our mental health to stay in contact with old friends. I do some of that. I do some long walks in the woods. I like to do that. I like to be alone quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, I think most of people don't appreciate a lot loneliness. They always think that maybe you need to be with another person or surrounded by people, and I like to go walk and go to the trail and just get lost there and just enjoy myself.
Exactly.
So that's great. Yeah,
I like that too.
So we're discovering a lot of things about you in your personal life, but now I will also like to get to know more about your professional life. And the first thing I want to know is about your job here at the University of the Ozarks. So first, how many years have you been working here at the university?
This is my 17th year. I came in the fall of 2006.
Okay. Yeah. So did you started since that year as professor of Spanish?
I came in as assistant professor, yes. Previously, I had worked in Missouri at a women's college, Stevens College, for 11 years. And then I had an interim year that I was on the market. And I taught at Mizzou as a visiting professor for 1 year, and went on the market, and this opportunity presented itself. Great opportunity.
How did you end knowing about Ozarks and the opportunity to get to work here?
It was listed, Chronicle of Higher Education, I think, was the place I found the job listing. And I applied for it. Had a lot of experience at a small school that was somewhat similar. Dr. Strain and Dr. Heil interviewed me at MLA in Washington, D.C. In December of 2005. And we had a great conversation. And I visited campus that spring of 2006. was very, very drawn to the school because of the Walton International Scholars Program. I thought that was the coolest thing imaginable because I'd been working at Stevens for 11 years, and we had a very, very, very tiny Latin student demographic there. It was less than 1%. And to come down here and see all these kids from Central America, which is the region that I actually is my specialty, was just a mind blower. I mean, the kids took me out to eat, and we had some great conversations, and it was just a really, really attractive place. And fortunately, I got the offer. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. You have been working here 17 years at the University of the Ozarks. What is the part that you like the most about your job?
Well, I like almost all of it. I like the size of the institution. I love my colleagues. I like the atmosphere. I'm in love with my students. I mean, I just like to be around young people. I like to share some of the things that I know with my students. And it's just a really attractive atmosphere to me. I don't think I could see myself in an R1 big school, just doing a lot of research. I like the teaching. I've been able to have a lot of autonomy here and create the kinds of classes that I like to teach and want to teach. And I've been conferred a lot of confidence as to what kind of classes I put together and teach. I think they give us a lot of freedom in that regard.
In that regard of the classes, you have created classes for the university from scratch, right?
Yeah,
Or
well, grammar classes are already created. I mean, you just teach them. But beyond that, like the Latin American Civilization class, the Hispanics in the U.S., are classes that, I've kind of created those the way I want to teach them. The Hispanics in the U.S. was my creation. The Latin American film class is one. I mean, those classes are taught at most universities, but I do it the way I want to, and it's worked out well. The literature classes are challenging because they take a lot of time to teach, a lot of preparation, and I'm given total autonomy to create the literature classes that I think are appropriate.
I noticed that you are the only one that teaches that type of classes related to Latin America. So it makes me wonder, what will it happen if after you retire, for example? If you do retire,
there are
soon.
plenty of exceptional scholars out there that would love a job like this. I'm not, I don't have any stake on this, what I do here. There are plenty of really, really good scholars that could probably come in here and do a better job than me. But I think one of the things I'd like to do here is leave a kind of a legacy. I'm working on the library collection now, and working on a big order with Doug Den, and that's one of the things I'd like to leave.
Yeah. You have been working here in the university, but on those 17 years here at Ozarks, that has not been the only position you have held here at the university, right?
Well, I've been involved in some peripheral things, some things that are central, I think, to the university mission and to what we do here. One of them was the Walton Arts and Ideas series, which I wasn't an official director, but I directed it for 3 years. And I think during those 3 years, we did some interesting things. We brought some very interesting guests to campus, musicians and poets and politicians and novelists and people like that. And one of my goals was to try and represent our Walton scholars group, and brought some four Central American intellectuals that I consider to be probably the top four for the top 10 anyway, and they came and visited Ozarks, and we had a lot of engagement with the students. And I thought that was a good experience. We brought some other people in, I thought, that musicians that were interesting, and that, and the president asked me, I think it was in 2016, to head up the Walton International Scholars Program. And I said, of course, I'll help you out on that. And so I was in that position for 2 years. and brought in 2 classes. Did you know that?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons you're here.
Yeah.
Very proud of those classes. Proud of the work I did during those 2 years. There's a lot of work, and I knew it was a temporary situation. Yeah, because my real job here is, of course, teaching. And we were looking for someone to take that position.
So you always were with the mentality that it was going to be just temporary, not like being there as the director of the scholarship for many years.
Yes, that really, I understood totally that wasn't really my job. That I was an interim director. Yeah. And that there would be a search conducted and someone else would come in and take the reins of the program. I totally understood that. That's the way I knew it had to be. But I did really savor and relish the opportunity to gain the experience that I got being the director. It was a lot of work. I learned a lot. Yeah. And I thought I chose 2 really good classes of kids that came in that have done, I think every one of them has done exceptionally well. We had a Hury was one of them last year, Vicente Vasquez from Panama, yeah. And your class, too, has been exceptional. You guys have done really amazing work.
I think I will always be thankful for the opportunity that you opened for me.
It wasn't me. It was the scholarship. It was Sam, and he put it
But you
together.
chose me.
Well, yeah, but I've always thought that, talent chooses itself. It's not the person that chooses. It was what you brought to the table. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. So we'll keep talking a little bit about the Walton Scholarship and your director stage on the university. What is the best part that you remember about being the Walton Scholarship director?
Well, I enjoyed the trips and the interview process. It was a lot of work. I mean, it wasn't like you were on vacation. You were there to work, and the next day you got up at 4 a.m. and went to the next place. So it was, but I enjoyed the interview process. Meeting the parents was fun for me because I was able to talk to them in Spanish. And, that was fun. I enjoyed orientation the first week when the students come in and everything's new to them and you have to explain things. I particularly remember calling students on the telephone long distance with another group of Waltons to inform them that they had received the scholarship. That was a beautiful, just a really, really special moment that I treasure remembering those phone calls.
I really appreciate how you did that. At least in my case, I still remember how everything was that day because I was doing homework in my room. Because I was in some courses back in Honduras, and I was doing some homework there, and I received your call, but it was not you, it was Valeria. Valeria Carillas. And I remember that she started to ask to me what did I think about our government and in Honduras, and what did I think about the media in Honduras. And I was like, oh, if I say something wrong here, I will not get the scholarship anymore.
Right.
But I said the truth. I said that the mass media in Honduras is corrupted in some way with the government, and that the past government was corrupt as well, and they were involved in a lot of things. And after that, I remember that Valeria told me, okay, so eat well, eat a lot of Honduran food because you will be here in August. And I was like, what? And I screamed, and my mom heard all that, and I ran to tell her. So I think that was amazing. And then I talked to you, and you gave me the news as well. So that was really amazing.
You know, another thing, and I totally identify with what you were feeling because you weren't really sure when you were talking to Valeria whether you were going to be chosen or not. There's a little bit of suspense there. But, the other thing that I value and appreciate and, just treasure about not necessarily having even been the director, but it's just the friendships that I've been able to develop with the kids, the Walton Scholars, and how close we become, and there was a lot of respect. And there's a little bit of sadness when they leave because I know that I'm not going to see them again anytime soon. But that's the treasure, the friendships, the exchanges, the camaraderie, that sort of thing.
Yeah, And with the good things, there are also bad things. So, what's like the hardest thing that you had to take as a decision, maybe as Walton director, or what's the hardest part of being a Walton director for you?
I think the hardest part was the on the ground during the semester ins and outs of like meetings, regulations, things like that were sometimes a little bit difficult. Students, sometimes had their own perspective on the scholarship and sometimes proposed changes, and I was, of course, totally unable to make changes, or that wasn't my job. So that side of it, and students would come sometimes to me with problems. Trying to get visas for parents to come for graduation was sometimes difficult. Making plane reservations and putting together all the logistics for airport pickup and drop off, all of that was difficult, but it was just part of the job. I don't remember anything really negative other than some students had some personal problems. That was a little bit hard to deal with at times, because I'm not really good at being a counselor. I try to be I try to be nice, but sometimes maybe I can be a little too strict,
During your stage as Walton director, do you remember any like story or anecdote, like funny anecdote from those experiences that you had in every country, one that you can remember?
Well, I'm trying to remember here. I remember an instance in, I believe it was Guatemala, where we had interviewed a student, and for some reason her mother or something after the interview insisted that we go to her house and eat something, and we had some time, and one of the other directors and I went. And she was living in this really poor little place in Guatemala City, cooking with firewood, and just it was just really kind of touching, and I felt bad because she was doing all this preparing food for us and stuff, and I couldn't guarantee I was going to choose her daughter for the scholarship, because I can't use that as a criteria. You have to go on other things, right? So, that's one of the memories. I probably have some more, but they're not rushing into my mind at this point. I think seeing some of the ex-students on the visits was a treasure, because they would show up. We'd get together and eat at night sometimes, and some of the students I hadn't seen in 5 or 6 years, on these trips they were there, and we got to renew some things and go over and talk about the old times.
I know that we have a director here, Nicole, that is the Walton Scholarship Director, but if let's suppose that the position for Walton Director is vacant right now, will you take the role again as Walton Director?
I don't think so. I'd like to help the program, but I don't think I'd really want to be director again. It's a lot of work. I know Nicole's doing a fantastic job. She's very talented, with the kids and everything, and she does really fine work. No, I probably wouldn't. I mean, as much as I love the program and support it wholeheartedly, I think it's a very unique program. I don't think there's anything quite like it in the United States. But being director again, I don't really think that's what I'd like to do at this point in time.
Yeah. Let's keep talking, but now about the Waltons itself, the scholars, because we have been talking sometimes about some issues that the Walton scholars, we think sometimes that we have here after getting to the U.S. and start studying and everything. One of those is like really simple, but is the allowance. Right now we get $125 monthly, and I want to ask you, because I think this is something that is interesting when you get the answer from someone that is used to use the dollar for daily purchases of or everything. So do you think that's enough for 1 month for a person, for a student?
It might be for some. It may not be for everyone. I'd like to know how long that allowance has been stuck at 125. I think it maybe should be adjusted for inflation. I don't know. I don't make those decisions. That's basically the foundation. You know, they maybe a proposal could be made to them to raise it. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable really expressing strong opinions about that, because it really, you know, $125 is not a lot of money. And I know you guys do have expenses outside of your meals and stuff.
Yeah, especially during these periods like spring break or Thanksgiving break, the winter break, things like that.
Exactly. So there, you know, I can understand the rationale being made for an adjustment upwards in some way of bringing it up a bit. I would certainly not be opposed to it.
Yeah.
And that's in that regard. I think you could probably make a case for that. Yeah.
Another thing that the Walton scholars have struggled, maybe in the last couple of years, it has been strengthening a lot in the sense of talking more with the director, for example, and it's the transcripts. We have been, in the past, I know that transcripts were given on a case-by-case basis if they needed like to keep studying and everything.
Right.
Now they are enforcing it, not giving the transcripts to anyone after 4 years after you go back to your home country. So first I wanted to ask you about that. What is your opinion about doing that for the scholars to retain the transcripts?
Well, I think it's being done to try and enforce the 4-year return rule. And, you know, that's been a ironclad rule inside the program for years and years. Whether it should be changed, I think, is certainly open to discussion, should be open to discussion. It'd have to go through the foundation. Again, I don't want to get into, you know, my particular opinion on it because it might be controversial, but I think, you know, I do think that the objective of the Walton Scholarship is a little bit stuck in the 80s. And you know, maybe we need to revisit some of these things, or they need to be revisited by those that have the power to change them, about, you know, bringing some things up to date. I do agree that, you know, if a student is awarded a scholarship to come study here, there should be some return you know, policy to make that student go home and help his or her country in a way that's favorable. I'm not sure that that's always done. Are there alternatives to that model? Could it be done in different ways? I think probably yes.
Yeah.
How that could be implemented, I'm not sure. I think there has been a little bit of flexibility in now allowing students not to necessarily go back to their home country, but to go back to the region and work. I think that's a positive development. But in terms of, you know, changing the regulations, that may be hard to do, but I think it's a discussion that probably should take place.
I know you say that you don't want to get controversial, but I don't know.
I mean, I just don't know, because I don't really, you know, when the foundation has put the scholarship together, they've made this beautiful thing possible for so many years. It could have very well been unplugged when the Cold War ended. And they had the foresight to keep it going, because it's as necessary now as it was in the 80s at its inception. But, you know, as to the regulations, that's just something that, you know, I think they should be discussed, though. I mean, I don't think it's like these are never going to change. You know, I think there has to be discussions on other possibilities and other options, other ways to allow students to help their countries.
I think you mentioned a very important event that probably brought the start of the scholarship, the Cold War.
Yes.
Because I have read the history of the Walton Scholarship in the website, in the official website. Obviously, they're not going to say it, but I read the background, and it matches with the dates that they created and the events that were happening in the world. The scholarship basically was created to avoid the countries in Central America and Mexico to be part of the communism of the Soviet Union. And that was part of the creation of the scholarship. And I feel that in some ways the scholarship is stuck still in those events or in those like purposes or objectives, and I think some things are obsolete maybe because we even live in a more globalized world. We can do a lot of things not being in the country. For example, we can still help our countries without being in the country. And in my case, for example, because I know that every case is different, but in my case that I study communications and I'm related to the media field, I don't think it's necessary for me at least to be in Honduras, for example, because being Honduras and being a journalist or someone involved in the media field is too risky sometimes. If you talk about certain topics, you can even get killed because of that. And you can still raise your voice as a journalist outside your country and say the bad things that your government back in Honduras is doing without the risk of being killed because you're saying the truth or something that the government doesn't like to do. So I think things like that should be revised maybe from the scholarship because they are stuck in the 80s, you know. And you mentioned a really good event that was the Cold War, and that was part of the ignition of the program.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you also, what will you think if a student, Walton Scholar, that, for example, graduated or is about to graduate, what will you think or what will you say if they want to come back to the United States and work, even if it's after paying the 4 years of service that the scholarship gives?
I think they have every right to do that. If they're in compliance with the rules of the scholarship, why not? I mean, it's that's their freedom. That's their agency as a human being. They can come work in the United States if they do it. If they acquire the right visa or whatever. I have no problem at all with that. I don't think just because of the fact you're Walton scholar that you have to be anchored in your country the rest of your life.
Yeah, but will not that be against the purpose of the scholarship?
Some might say that, but it could, in the sense what you were just talking about. Maybe there's a way to help one's country while living abroad. You know, I mean. I just think that, nationalism and allegiance to geographical spaces is important in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's so transcendentally important that it should prohibit somebody that's complied with the regulations to go somewhere else and find their dream, I just don't.
It was interesting talking about the Walton Scholarship and your position as the Walton director. We're going to move on because I'm really interested in how your relationship with Latinos and the Latino community is in general. Mm-hmm. So first I wanted to ask you, how many countries in Latin America have you been to? And what was the last time you visited a Latin American country?
See, I was in Costa Rica, I believe, in 2019. That was the last time. The pandemic put a lot of things on hold. Mm-hmm. I've been to every Spanish-speaking country in Latin America except Uruguay. So that's a lot. I mean, that's pretty much every country in South America that speaks Spanish, all of Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. That's Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic. I led one of the things that we haven't talked about is the trips that I organized here at Ozarks.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation about that you're married with a Nicaraguan.
Yes.
How did you end up marrying with a Nicaraguan?
Okay. Well, first of all, it wasn't something where we met online or anything like that. This was the 80s, so that In the 80s, as you know, I was going to Central America 2 or 3 times a year. I was keeping up with the situation very carefully. The country that was really interesting to be in was Nicaragua because there was a lot going on. The Sandinistas had totally polarized the country. There was an ongoing war at the border. The people were suffering, but you could still go there and talk to people and get to know the country. And I did that, and I met her on one of my trips and liked her. And so I went back and saw her again, and that happened a few more times. And then eventually, a couple of years later, I decided to try and get her visa to come up and visit, so she could, think about, well, is this a place that I might like to live if I were to marry Bill and this? And so she came here, and then it just evolved from there.
From where it comes also your closeness to Latino culture and people, besides the fact that you're married to a Nicaraguan woman that probably has mixed your culture with a lot of things like food, everything. Yeah.
Well, a lot of this goes back to when I was living in Columbia, Missouri at the time before I was a graduate student in Spanish. All of my friends were Latino. We had a group. We used to call it La Cofradía. We had a group of friends, and we would hang out all the time, every weekend. There was a couple of guys from Honduras, a guy from El Salvador, a couple of Venezuelans, and we had a little group. We had a little group of people, and we hung out together all the time. And then, of course, in graduate school, a lot of my friends were Latinos then. And then when I came here, it just, it was a continuation. I got married and came here. And then, I when I work in the courts, I see Latinos every day. So I can't be friends with anybody that I interpret for in the court. That's sort of something that's prohibited. But I have quite a few friends, and some of them don't live here. I talk to them on the phone, and they're in other places, but we've maintained friendship. So, a lot of my friends are Hispanic. I made a lot of friends, too, when I was going to conferences, giving papers. I get to know a lot of people in the academy that work in Latin American studies and Spanish, and, that's I still maintain those contacts.
Do you used to talk to them, to your friends that you mentioned from Venezuela, El Salvador, Honduras? Did you used to talk to them in Spanish or in English?
Always in Spanish.
Always in Spanish.
That was one of the ways that I kept working on the language all the time. Yeah, that was back in the late 70s, early 80s, probably.
Latinos, as you know, and you have taught this in a lot of classes, have struggled over all the history of the United States here in the country. Why do you think Latinos have received all this hate and racism since long time ago, since like the beginning of history of the country itself?
Because we have not had an inclusive democracy. Really, it didn't even really start until the Civil Rights Movement, I don't think. I mean, there was, I think, as we've studied in our class, institutional segregation against Mexicans in Arizona and Texas and California goes way back to the early 20th century. We talked about the Puerto Rican experience in the 50s and how they were typecasted and they were stereotyped as being, gang people, West Side Story. There's always been a reluctance, I think, because there is a current, and I'm not saying that this is the only ideological grounding the United States have, because a lot of many people are open and they don't have these feelings, but I think there has been kind of a xenophobic streak to immigrants that are Latino and Asian, more so than those from Europe, and I think that's one of the reasons there's been systematic discrimination against Latinos. It's similar. You can find the parallels with the experience of African Americans, although the history is a bit different in that regard. But yeah.
Do you foresee a positive change for Latinos and how they are involved in the society here in the U.S. for the near future?
Yes, I see.
Late future.
Absolutely, I foresee continuing growth among Latinos in our political system. I don't know whether in my lifetime I see it, but I think I told your class in your lifetime we will have a Latino president here in the United States. I'm almost sure of that. I see that political engagement, increased economic success across the board. I think it's an incredibly positive force in our society today. We need people from other places, and the Latinos are the logical people. They're close by, and I embrace immigration, and I think it's necessary. But I see big things coming.
I hope that Latinos get the chance that they deserve here in the country. We're getting to the last part of the conversation, and this part is kind of a dynamic that I want to do each episode, and each short phrase answers to different questions that are like easy. So I'll start. What is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
Put on the coffee.
Religion?
Nothing institutional.
Morning person or afternoon person? Or night person?
All three. I think best in the morning and read deeply in the morning. Okay, when I have time.
Favorite music genre?
I like salsa and I like jazz.
Favorite artist?
I like Ruben Blades a lot because he's a poet.
A job you dreamed to have when you were a child?
I had no idea.
Okay.
I just didn't have that kind of dream.
You never imagined yourself?
No, I didn't. Okay. Just didn't.
TV shows or movies?
Movies.
What's the last movie you watched?
La Ley de Herodes, de Luis Estrada. It's a Mexican filmmaker.
That's the last one you saw?
I want to watch Tar, which just came out, and Women Talking.
Cats or dogs?
Both. Yes.
Do you have any?
I have a dog.
You have a dog?
Yes.
But you like cats too?
Oh, yes, very much.
And finally, I give you the opportunity to ask me any question that you would like to.
What are you going to, when you graduate, and I know that's a couple months away, that's a huge experience for you and something I really look forward to. Yeah. What are you going to take out away from your 4 years here at Ozarks that you think you'll never forget, that it'll be with you the rest of your life?
Oh, wow. I think I will never forget anything about the 4 years. I think, before I got the scholarship, I never imagined myself being here in the U.S., recording a podcast with my professor, which is American, and I'm in a university here. So it's incredible for me, I think, to think that I am graduating in a couple of months from a U.S. university. And I feel that I will never forget anything of this. It has been an amazing experience that maybe got a little disrupted in 2020 because of the pandemic. Because I think that if the pandemic didn't exist, probably my experience here would have been different in a lot of ways, because all my 2020 year, for example, was weird. I don't even consider it part of my education, even if I had like the classes and they were good quality, but it was not like the American experience that I wanted for my education. So I think that's the only year that I think changed a lot of things, but I think I will treasure all these moments in my heart and in my mind forever, because it has been an experience of a lifetime, sincerely. Yeah.
Well, we're really, really proud of you, and we're going to miss you a lot when you leave. And we hope you come back and visit someday.
Yeah, thank you.
Even if I'm not here, you come back and, you come back and see everybody and do some memory stuff. And,
I really hope that I can see you again after graduating.
Oh, that will happen, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe it will. Yes.
Yeah, hopefully, because, I'm very thankful with you because of all the opportunities, because you said that at the beginning, but you saw something in me too, so I think that's something I have to be thankful for with you, because I remember that night in the Clarion Hotel in Tegucigalpa.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, from the 3 directors there, you were the one that gave me the cool vibes, that you were really cool, like friendly and everything. So I think you never spoke to me in Spanish that time. I don't know.
No, I couldn't do. They didn't let me speak Spanish during those interviews, which is fine. I mean, we wanted to hear your English, and your English was very good already. And I think one of the things that really impressed you'd already written a novel, and you had done all this amazing stuff. I really liked you.
Yeah, and another thing that I will treasure always is how my English has improved since I came, because before coming to the U.S., I didn't have the time or the opportunity to learn more or to practice more my English speaking with other people. So I think that's another thing that hopefully I will not forget to speak in English after I graduate, because I will be in Honduras back, and they most of the people don't speak in English there.
Right.
So but yeah, I think all those are going to be things that I will treasure. So any final word that you want to say?
Well, just thank you for the opportunity to come in and, touch on a few things. There's always so much to tell and so many things we'd like to talk about. There's never seems to be time. Life is very short, and, we have to do these sorts of things. And these kind of interviews are, I think, important. I don't know how much longer I'm going to work here. It can't be forever, know, and so I treasure this kind of experience, and I hope that those who are out there listening got to know me a little bit better than they would have otherwise. So
thank you, and thank you everyone that listened to this episode of the CDRB Show. I'm Christian Rodriguez, and you can follow us on Instagram at CDRB Productions. There will be posting a lot of things, so we'll see you next time. Thank you.